The aurora spindle did not simply orbit the planet below. It pierced the upper atmosphere like a silver needle, stitching the void to the sky. From the observation deck of the lower tiers, the planet was a bruising expanse of sapphire and violent violet storms, a view that usually commanded high prices in the upper residential rings. Down here in Tier 9, the view was free, mostly because it was framed by rusting coolant pipes and smelled faintly of recycled ozone and fried algae. Nara adjusted the cuffs of her uniform, the sterile white fabric pulling tight against the fine, slate-gray fur of her wrists. She was a Felidari, a species known throughout the galaxy for their grace, their silence, and their profound capacity for biological manipulation. But here in the cramped waiting room of the Paws and Claws veterinary clinic, she was simply the assistant who was overqualified to clean cages, but underqualified, legally speaking, to perform surgery. Her ears, tufted with soft white hair that contrasted with the gray of her face, twitched toward the door. The sensors picked up the heavy, rhythmic thrum of the station's ventilation system, a sound that grated against her heightened auditory nerves. She suppressed a low rumble in her throat, a natural reflex of discomfort. She had learned to swallow her sounds. In Lisara, her home-world silence was a virtue. For her, silence was survival. "Nara, are those inventory sheets done?" Dr. Halloway called out from the back office. Halloway was a human, a kind but perpetually distracted man who smelled of antiseptic and peppermint tea. "I finished them at 8 o'clock this morning, Doctor," Nara replied, her voice soft, carrying a melodic lilt that she tried hard to flatten into professional neutrality. "We are low on synthetic adrenaline and feline calmative paste." Right. Ordering it now." Nara sighed, her long, expressive tail swishing once before she caught it and tucked it neatly against her leg. She walked to the small window. Her reflection ghosted over the planet below, large amber eyes, with vertical slit pupils, a humanoid face covered in the finest velvet fur, and a posture that was too rigid. She looked like a creature waiting for a trap to spring. It had been 6 months since she had fled Lisara. 6 months since the Council of Purity had branded her genetic code a hazard to the sanctity of the species. She touched her abdomen instinctively. They had called it a mercy. They had said her ability to channel bioresonance was unstable, a chaotic mutation that would pollute the collective frequency of the Felidari. Sterilization was the only cure. The spindle was a hive of scum villainy and desperate people, which made it the perfect place to disappear. The clinic door chimed a cheerful electronic sound that signaled the end of her brief moment of introspection. The chaotic energy entered before the people did. First came a carrier swinging wildly, then a man disheveled and smelling of hydroponic nutrient solution and engine grease. Flanking him were 2 children who seemed to be vibrating on entirely different frequencies. Easy. "We are going to the nice lady patch. I promise you aren't going to the airlock," the man said, wrestling with the carrier. Nara stepped forward, her professional mask sliding into place. "Welcome to Paws and Claws. How can I help you today?" The man looked up, blowing a lock of dark hair out of his eyes. This was Jonah Reed. Nara knew him, though not formally. He was the biomechanic who kept the Tier 9 hydroponic farms running. He had a reputation for being able to fix anything that grew or hummed, and for being perpetually late to pick up his children from school. "It's Patch," Jonah said, breathless. "He's doing that thing again, the wheezing, and his skin is all red under the fur. I think he got into the ventilation ducts again." "He ate a spacer bug," the little boy shouted. He looked to be about 5 years old, wearing a jumpsuit that was stained with 3 different colors of paint. "I told him not to, but he crunched it." "It wasn't a spacer bug, Finch," the older girl corrected. She was tall for her age, perhaps 11, with glasses that reflected the clinic's overhead lights. She held a datapad like a shield. "Based on the symptom onset and the dermal irritation, it is likely an allergic reaction to the xylose moss spores Dad brought home on his boots." Jonah looked at his daughter, looking pained. "Nora, honey, I scrubbed those boots for 20 minutes. "Clearly not well enough," Nora said, adjusting her glasses. Nara offered a small, polite smile. "Let us get him onto the table." Jonah heaved the carrier onto the examination table. Nara undid the latches with deft, long fingers. Inside a tomcat of indeterminate lineage, mostly orange with one ear missing a tip, was wheezing pitifully. His eyes were swollen shut, and his breathing was a ragged, wet rasp. "Oh, Patch," Finch whispered, climbing onto a stool to get a better look. "Is he going to explode?" "Cats do not explode, Finch," Jonah said, though he looked at Nara with genuine panic in his brown eyes. "He's not going to explode, right?" "No," Nara said gently. She placed her hands on the cat. Immediately the sensation hit her. It was not just touch. It was a flood of data. Her palms tingled as the bioelectric field of the animal washed over her. She could feel the constriction in his bronchial tubes, the frantic, erratic rhythm of his heart, and the histamine storm raging in his blood. It was loud, a cacophony of biological distress that made her own teeth ache. "Dr. Holloway is on a call with a supplier," Nara said, assessing the situation quickly. "But this is an acute allergic reaction. Anaphylaxis is setting in." "Do something," Jonah urged, his hands hovering uselessly over the cat. "Please. He's the only thing my wife left us that breathes." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Jonah winced, realizing he had said too much too loud. Nora looked down at her datapad. Finch just stared at the cat, his lower lip trembling. Nara looked at the struggling animal. The standard protocol was an injection of epinephrine and corticosteroids. But the cabinet was locked, and the key was in Holloway's pocket in the back office. By the time she got him, Patch's airway might close completely. She looked at the camera in the corner of the room. It was a dummy unit broken weeks ago. She looked at Jonah, who was busy wiping Finch's nose. "Do not engage," the voice of the high healer echoed in her memory. "Your resonance is a dissonance. It breaks what it should bind." But the cat was dying. The vibration of its life was fading, the rhythm stuttering. Nara leaned in close, pretending to check the cat's gums. She lowered her head until her cheek was inches from Patch's flank. "Hold him steady," she commanded softly. Jonah obeyed, placing his large, rough hands on the cat's shoulders. Nara closed her eyes. She reached deep into her chest, past the fear, past the training of the Purity Council, and found the hum. It started in her diaphragm, a low-frequency rumble that was below the range of human hearing. It was the purr. For a normal Felidari, the purr was a comfort mechanism, a way to accelerate bone knitting and tissue repair. But Nara's purr was different. It was deeper, richer, a multi-tonal frequency that could grab onto the cellular structure of another being and shake it into alignment. She let a sliver of it escape. It was barely a sound. It was a vibration that traveled through her chest, down her arms, and into the cat. Inside Patch's body, Nara visualized the swollen pathways of the lungs. She pushed the resonance into them, commanding the inflammation to recede, urging the capillaries to constrict, singing the song of open breathe flow. Under Jonah's hands, the cat stiffened, then suddenly went limp. "What?" Jonah started. "Shh," Nara hissed. She pushed a little harder. Just a fraction. The risk was immense. If she pushed too hard, she could stop the cat's heart. If she used too much power, her fur would begin to glow, a bioluminescent side effect of the energy transfer. Patch let out a long, shuddering breath. The wheezing stopped. The frantic struggle ceased, replaced by a steady, rhythmic rise and fall of his ribs. Nara pulled back instantly, snapping the connection. She felt a wave of dizziness, the familiar drain of energy that came with the channel. She steadied herself against the metal table. "He is breathing," Nara said, her voice slightly breathless. The shock caused a momentary reset of his respiratory rhythm. "He is stabilizing." It was a lie, a medically nonsensical string of words, but Jonah did not care. He slumped against the counter, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. "Oh, thank the stars," Jonah whispered. He reached out and stroked Patch's head. "You scared me, you old scrap heap." Finch cheered a high-pitched sound that made Nara's ears flatten. "He's fixed. Nara fixed him." Nora looked up from her datapad. Her eyes narrowed behind her lenses. She looked at Nara, then at the cat. "That was statistically improbable without pharmaceutical intervention," she observed. Nara's heart skipped a beat. "Biology is full of anomalies, Nora." "Dad says that about his cooking," Finch giggled. Jonah laughed, a warm, resonant sound that filled the small, sterile room. He looked at Nara, and for the first time he really saw her. Not just the alien nurse, but the person. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what you did magic touch, I guess, but thank you." "It is my job," Nara said, turning away to wash her hands to hide the trembling in her fingers. The door to the back office opened, and Dr. Holloway bustled out. "Inventory ordered. Now what's the commotion?" "Oh, hello, Jonah. Patch eating spiders again." "Moss, apparently," Jonah said, straightening up. "But Nara handled it." "Good, good. She is a natural," Holloway said, clapping Nara on the shoulder. Nara flinched, then forced herself to relax. As Jonah gathered his family and the groggy cat to leave, the clinic door chimed again. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Standing in the doorway were 3 figures. They wore the stark, navy blue uniforms of the Interplanetary Health Inspectorate. But it was not their uniforms that made Nara's blood turn to ice. It was the insignia on the shoulder of the leader, a stylized double helix entwined with a star. The insignia of the Genetic Compliance Bureau. They were far from their jurisdiction, which usually ended at the core worlds. "We are conducting a random audit of medical facilities in this sector," the leader said. He was a tall humanoid with pale skin and eyes that looked like polished steel. He held a scanner in his hand. "Dr. Holloway." "Yes." Holloway looked confused, wiping his hands on his lab coat. "I had an inspection 3 months ago. Passed with flying colors." "This is a supplementary audit regarding personnel licensing," the inspector said. His gaze swept the room, ignoring Jonah and the children, and landed squarely on Nara. Nara stood very still, her tail wrapped tight around her ankle, a vice grip of anxiety. The inspector walked into the room, his boots clicking sharply on the tile. He stopped in front of Nara. He raised the scanner. "Felidari," the inspector stated. "Name, Nara," she whispered. "Full designation, just Nara." The inspector's eyes narrowed. He tapped a command into his device. "We have a flagged communique from the Lycerin Council regarding a fugitive carrier of a Class A genetic variance. The description matches a female Felidari former nursing caste operating in the Outer Rim." Nara felt the room spinning. They found me. The memories she had suppressed for 6 months came rushing back, violent and sharp. The memory, the Hall of Whispers on Lysara. The walls were made of white marble that absorbed sound. The high healer Sarek sat on a dais, raised high above her. He was old, his fur white as snow, his eyes blind, but seeing everything. "You are a corruption, Nara," Sarek had said, his voice a low growl that vibrated in her bones. "Your resonance does not heal. It rewrites. You change the song of the flesh. That is the power of the gods, and, in the hands of a mortal, it is heresy. We will not kill you. We are not barbarians. But we will silence the source. We will cut the connection. You will never purr again, and you will never bear kin to carry this curse." She had run that night, smuggled herself onto a cargo freighter carrying rare isotopes. "Back in the clinic, I have my work permit," Nara stammered. "It is registered with the station authority." "Station law is secondary to species preservation treaties," the inspector said coldly. He leaned in. "Your eyes. They are dilated. High stress or guilt." Jonah stepped forward. It was an impulsive move, placing his body between the inspector and Nara. "Hey, buddy. You are blocking the exit. We are trying to leave." The inspector looked at Jonah with disdain. "Step aside, citizen. This is official business." "It's a vet clinic," Jonah said, crossing his arms. "Unless you are here to warm a dog, you can wait until she is done with her patient." It was a brave, stupid distraction, but it failed. At that moment, the door to the carrier on the table popped open. Jonah had forgotten to latch it in his relief. Patch, disoriented, and still full of residual energy from Nara's resonance, stumbled out. The cat looked at the inspector, hissed, and then disaster struck. A second wave of the allergic reaction hit. It was the rebound effect. Because Nara had cut the connection too early, the histamine flooded back with double the force. Patch convulsed. His body arched, a terrible guttural sound tearing from his throat. He fell off the table, landing on the floor in a seizing heap. "Patch!" Finch screamed. The boy broke from his sister's grip and dove onto the floor, wrapping his small arms around the convulsing animal. "Finch, no!" Jonah shouted, diving after him. The cat was thrashing. Finch was crying. The inspector was stepping back in disgust. Nara saw nothing but the boy and the dying animal. The inspector was there, yes. The threat of sterilization was there, yes. But the child's grief was a physical weight in the air, pressing against her chest. She could not let the creature die in the boy's arms. She dropped to her knees. She ignored the inspector. She ignored Holloway's gasp. She placed both hands on the cat, right over Finch's small, trembling hands. "Let go, Finch," she whispered. "I have him." She did not hold back this time. She could not. The collapse was too advanced. She needed the full resonance. She opened the gate inside her. The purr exploded from her. It was audible this time, a deep thrumming bass note that shook the glass jars on the shelves. It was the sound of the planet turning, the sound of a star burning. And then came the light. It started at her fingertips, a soft, ethereal, azure glow. It traveled up her arms, illuminating the gray fur like fiber optics. It spread to her face, making her amber eyes blaze with an internal fire. The air around her shimmered, warping with the intensity of the biofeedback field. "Stabilize," she commanded, her voice overlapping with the purr, sounding like two voices speaking at once. "Repair. Knit. Calm." The light flowed from her into Patch. The cat's body levitated perhaps an inch off the floor, suspended in the field of acoustic levitation and biological force. The seizure stopped instantly. The swelling in the throat vanished as if erased by an artist's brush. Patch went limp, falling into a deep, restorative sleep. The light faded. The purr died down to silence. Nara knelt there, panting, her hands smoking slightly from the energy discharge. The room was deathly silent. Finch looked at her, eyes wide. "You glowed," he whispered, "like a firefly." Nara looked up. Jonah was staring at her. He was on his knees opposite her. He had seen everything. The light, the levitation, the raw, impossible power. He didn't look scared. He looked overwhelmed. Slowly, Nara turned her head to the inspector. The inspector was holding his scanner. The device was flashing red. He looked at the reading, then at Nara. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. "Bioresonance reading off the charts," the inspector said softly. "Confirmation absolute. You are the anomaly." He tapped a sequence into his communicator. "Log entry. Target located. Subject Nara Felidari exile. Initiating extraction protocol." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. He dropped it onto the floor in front of Nara. "By the authority of the Interplanetary Health Board and the Lycerin Council," he intoned, "you are hereby served with a notice for a mandatory genetic health evaluation. You have 3 days to report to Sector 4 Medical Hub. Failure to appear will result in immediate detention and forceful administration of the procedure." He looked at her with pity that was worse than hatred. "It is for the best. We cannot have untamed stars burning down the house." With a sharp nod to his subordinates, the inspectors turned and marched out of the clinic. The door chimed cheerfully behind them, a mocking punctuation mark. Nara stared at the envelope. Genetic health evaluation. It was the polite bureaucratic term for removing her reproductive organs and severing the neural pathways that allowed her to purr. They would make her a hollow thing, a mute nurse. "Nara!" Dr. Holloway's voice was trembling. What was that?" Nara grabbed the envelope and scrambled to her feet. She felt naked, exposed. "I have to go." "Nara, wait," Jonah said, standing up. "I cannot be here," she gasped. "I put you in danger. They saw." She ran. She bolted past Holloway, past the counter, and out into the corridor of the station. She ran until her lungs burned, dodging maintenance drones and startled pedestrians. She ran until she reached the lift to the lower dormitories, the cheapest, darkest place on the station. That night, the artificial twilight of Aurora Spindle was a gloomy gray. Nara sat on the edge of her bunk in her dormitory unit. The room was 6 feet by 8 feet. It contained a bed, a sanitation unit, and a small viewport that looked out at a bulkhead. She held the envelope in her hands. She had not opened it. She didn't need to. She knew the date, 3 days, 72 hours. She could try to run again. But where the inspectors had her biometric signature now, any ship she boarded would be flagged. If she ran, they would hunt her down like a rabid animal. If she stayed, they would cut the soul out of her. A tear, hot and heavy, rolled down her cheek and matted the fur on her snout. She wiped it away angrily. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound came from the corridor door. Nara froze. Had they come early? Was it the enforcement squad? Meow. It was a questionable, raspy sound. Not a threat. A query. Nara stood up and walked to the door. She keyed the lock. The panel slid open. Sitting in the corridor, looking remarkably smug for a cat who had nearly died 6 hours ago, was Patch. "How did you do?" Nara started. The cat trotted into the room as if he owned it. He jumped onto her narrow bed, circled 3 times, and curled up on her pillow. "He followed your scent trail," a voice said from the doorway. "Though we helped with the elevator buttons." Nara looked up. Jonah Reed stood in the hallway. He was holding a large duffel bag in one hand and Finch's hand in the other. Nora stood behind him, looking critically at the peeling paint of the corridor walls. "Jonah," Nara said, her voice shaking, "you should not be here. You saw what I am. I am dangerous." "I saw you save my cat," Jonah said. He stepped just inside the threshold, letting the door slide shut behind him to block the curious glances of passing neighbors. "And I saw those suits hand you a death warrant. I know what mandatory evaluation means, Nara. My wife was a xenobiologist. I know how the council works." "Then you know I am a contagion," Nara said, wrapping her arms around herself. "They say I will destabilize the ecosystem, that my genes are a weapon." "I think that's a load of asteroid dust," Jonah said firmly. He dropped the duffel bag on the floor. "And I think if you stay here alone tonight, you are going to do something stupid, like try to airlock yourself or run into a trap." Finch let go of his dad's hand and walked over to the bed. He climbed up and sat next to Patch. He looked at Nara. "You glowed," he said again. "Can you teach Patch to glow? Then we wouldn't need a nightlight." Nara managed a weak, watery laugh. "It does not work like that, little one." Jonah looked at her, his expression shifting from determined to something softer, more vulnerable. "Look, Nara, you saved Patch. You saved Finch's heart from breaking today. We pay our debts in the Reed family." He gestured to the cramped, cold room. "They are going to be watching this place. They expect you to panic. They expect you to run." "I have nowhere to go," Nara whispered. Jonah took a step closer. He smelled of engine grease and rain, a scent that was impossible on a space station yet somehow clung to him. "If they make this hard for you, if they come for you, don't face it in this box," Jonah said. His voice was low, steady, a grounding force in the chaos of her mind. Come home with me. Nara looked at him. Home. We have a spare room, Jonah said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Well, it's mostly full of spare hydroponic parts and Nora's failed experiments, but there's a bed. It's off the main grid. Harder for the inspectors to snoop around without a warrant. And frankly, I make terrible lasagna, and I was hoping you might know how to calibrate a nutrient dispenser, because mine keeps spraying algae on the ceiling. He was rambling. He was trying to make her smile. You are inviting a fugitive alien with a genetic bounty on her head into your home with your children, Nara asked, incredulous. I am inviting the nurse who saved our cat, Jonah corrected. And yeah, maybe I am an idiot. But I'm a stubborn idiot. Nora spoke up from the corner. Statistically, hiding in a residential zone decreases the probability of immediate abduction by 47% compared to a transient dormitory. Also, we have a better internet. Nara looked at the three of them. A broken family, a human mess. And yet standing there they felt warmer than the sun she had left behind on Lysara. She looked at the notice on the floor. Then she looked at Patch, purring softly on her pillow. Just for a few nights, Nara said quietly. Until the appointment. Just for a few nights, Jonah agreed. He picked up her small bag of belongings from the shelf. Come on. The lasagna isn't going to burn itself. Nara stepped out of the room, leaving the cold gray walls behind. As she walked down the corridor with the human family, Patch trotting at her heels, she felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't the resonance. It wasn't the fear. It was the quiet, terrifying hum of hope. The apartment door slid open with a protest of grinding metal that suggested the lubrication track had not been serviced in at least 2 years. Nara hesitated on the threshold, clutching her small travel bag to her chest. If her dormitory room was a prison cell designed by minimalists who hated joy, Jonah Reed's home was a biological explosion contained within 4 walls. It was green. That was the first thing that assaulted her senses. Vines of pothos and trailing ivy draped from the ceiling pipes, their leaves waxy and vibrant under the warm, artificial grow lights that replaced standard illumination. The air did not smell of recycled ozone here. It smelled of damp earth basil and the faint, sweet scent of machine oil. Welcome to the jungle, Jonah said, ushering her inside and kicking a stray robotic servo motor under a cabinet. Watch your step. The floor is technically lava, but mostly just Lego bricks and cat toys. Nara stepped inside her tail, twitching nervously as it brushed against a large leafy fern near the entrance. The space was cluttered, but undeniably alive. Every surface told a story. The walls were plastered with drawings of cats, some with 6 legs, some with wings done in crayon by a childish hand. There were posters of vintage starships next to diagrams of feline anatomy. It was chaotic, loud in a visual sense, and overwhelmingly warm. It is extensive, Nara said, trying to be polite. It is a mess, Jonah corrected with a grin. But it is home. Kids, we have a guest. Be cool. Nora was sitting at the kitchen table, which was covered in holographic schematics and cereal bowls. She looked up, pushing her glasses up her nose. I have vacated the lower bunk in my room for Finch, so the guest can have the storage unit. I mean the guest room. Thank you, Nora, Nara said softly. Finch came barreling out of the hallway, wearing a onesie that looked like a shark. Is Patch staying too? Can Patch sleep with me? Patch sleeps where Patch wants, Jonah said, dropping his keys into a bowl. That is the law of the jungle. Now, Nara, let me show you where you will be crashing. It is not the Ritz, but it has a door that locks. The room was small, barely larger than her dorm, but someone had tried. A fresh blanket with a pattern of stars was folded on the narrow bed. A small, potted succulent sat on the nightstand, looking brave. I cleared out the hydroponic pumps, Jonah said, leaning against the doorframe. Mostly. If you hear a gurgling sound in the night, do not panic. It is just the nutrient cycler next door. Or Finch snoring. They sound identical. Nara placed her bag on the bed. She looked at Jonah, at the tired lines around his eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Why are you doing this, Jonah?" "You barely know me." Jonah shrugged, crossing his arms. "I know enough. I know you saved my cat when you didn't have to. I know you are scared. And I know that this station can be a cold place when you are alone. Besides, I need someone to tell me why my tomatoes keep tasting like sulfur." Nara managed a small smile. "It is likely a pH imbalance in your magnesium feed." Jonah pointed a finger at her. "See, earning your keep already." Over the next 48 hours, the Reed household absorbed Nara into its chaotic orbit. It was a strange, terrifying transition. In Lysara, life was structured, silent, and ceremonial. Here, life was a series of improvisations. Nara found herself waking up not to a meditation chime, but to the sound of Finch singing a song about a brave toaster. She found herself standing in the kitchen, staring at a refrigerator that contained 3 jars of pickles, a block of cheddar, and questionable leftovers. "I will cook tonight," Nara announced on the second evening, unable to watch Jonah mournfully eat another bowl of instant algae noodles. Jonah looked up from his datapad, looking hopeful. "You cook like real food, not paste." "I am Felidari," Nara said with a touch of pride. "Our sense of smell is 40 times stronger than a human's. We do not eat paste." She raided Jonah's pantry and the small hydroponic garden on the balcony. She decided to make koshari a Lysaran comfort dish of layered grains, lentils, and a savory tomato reduction. It was supposed to be soothing, mild, and aromatic. However, the cultural exchange hit a snag during the seasoning phase. "It smells good," Jonah said, hovering over her shoulder. "But it needs a kick. You know, some zest." "It has zest," Nara said, stirring the pot. "I added cumin." "Cumin is a whisper, Nara. We need a shout." Jonah grabbed a small jar of red powder from the shelf. "This is earth spice, cayenne. Just a touch." Before Nara could stop him, before she could explain that Felidari taste buds were incredibly sensitive to capsaicin, Jonah had shaken a generous cloud of red dust into the pot. The result was memorable. 10 minutes later, they were sitting around the table. Nora was eating stoically, drinking copious amounts of water. Finch had taken one bite, declared his tongue was angry, and was now eating bread. Nara was trying to maintain her dignity, but her eyes were watering, and her nose was running. "Okay," Jonah wheezed, his own face flushed red. Maybe that was too much of a shout. Maybe it was a scream." Nara took a sip of water, her throat burning. "On my planet, we use this as a chemical weapon for crowd control." Jonah burst out laughing, then choked, then laughed again. "I am sorry. I ruined your masterpiece." "It is not ruined," Nara said, wiping her eyes. "It is memorable. You have created a new dish, fire stew." "I like fire stew," Finch declared, bravely dipping his bread into the sauce. For the first time in 6 months, Nara laughed. It was a rusty sound, a little jagged, but it was real. She looked around the table at the red-faced father, the serious daughter, the brave little boy, and felt a pang of longing so sharp it nearly doubled her over. This was what she had wanted. Back on Lysara before the exile, she had dreamed of being a nursery mother. She had wanted to raise kittens, to teach them the songs of their ancestors, to cook for a family. The council had taken that future away when they declared her genetic code unstable. They had said she would breed monsters. Looking at Finch, she wondered if she was truly as monstrous as they said. Later that evening, after the kitchen was cleaned and the smell of spice had faded, Nara found Nora in the living room. The girl was surrounded by holographic displays of wave patterns. "What are you working on?" Nara asked, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. Patch immediately jumped into her lap, purring like a diesel engine. "Science fair project," Nora muttered without looking up. "Topic: biological resonance in interspecies communication." Nara went very still. Her hand froze on Patch's back. That is an advanced topic for an 11-year-old, Nara said carefully. I am 12 in 2 months, Nora corrected. And it is fascinating. Did you know that some species can manipulate cellular regeneration using sound waves? The literature says it is theoretical, mostly observed in deep-sea aquatic life on Earth, but there are rumors about Felidari capabilities. Nora turned her chair around, fixing Nara with a penetrating stare, magnified by her lenses. You are a nurse. Have you ever seen it work? Nara's heart hammered against her ribs. She had to lie. She had to protect this clever, dangerous child from the truth. If Nora dug too deep, if she published a paper linking Felidari physiology to bioresonance, it could attract the council. It is mostly mythology, Nara said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Old stories. We purr to soothe, yes. But it is just vibration, like a cat sitting on a sore muscle. It is physics, not magic. Nora looked disappointed. Oh, I was hoping for something more revolutionary. My hypothesis was that the resonance matches the frequency of stem cell division. Nara wanted to scream. The girl was exactly right. It was precisely how it worked. Maybe you should focus on the psychological benefits, Nara suggested gently. How a pet's presence lowers cortisol levels. That is measurable. That is safe. Nora sighed and turned back to her screen. Safe is boring. But I guess I need a passing grade. Nara stood up, displacing a disgruntled Patch. She walked to the window, looking out at the stars. She was lying to them. Every minute she stayed here, she was deceiving them. Later, walking past the children's room, she saw Finch sleeping. He was twisted into a pretzel shape, his head hanging off the edge of the bed, his breathing shallow and rattling. Without thinking, Nara entered the room. Her training took over. She gently lifted his head, aligning his spine. She adjusted the pillow to open his airways. She placed a hand on his chest, not using the resonance but just feeling the rhythm of his heart. It was a strong, chaotic human heart. You are good at that, she jumped. Jonah was standing in the hallway watching her. He has sleep apnea, Jonah whispered. Mild case. Usually I have to go in there 3 times a night to fix him. His neck position was constricting the trachea, Nara whispered back, stepping out of the room. If you elevate the upper torso by 15 degrees, it helps. Jonah looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. You really were a mother in a past life, weren't you? Nara looked down. I was never a mother, Jonah. And I never will be. The silence stretched between them, heavy and sad. Jonah did not ask why. He seemed to understand that some doors were locked for a reason. Well, Jonah said softly, you are doing a pretty good job with my gremlins. Thank you. The romance, if one could call it that, did not begin with flowers or poetry. It began with an argument about a cat. It was the 3rd day. The deadline for the appointment was 48 hours away. They were in the living room. Patch was currently lying on his back on the rug, exposing his fluffy white belly, while Nara rubbed it. He never does that for me, Jonah complained, throwing his hands up. I bought him the premium salmon crunchies. I built him a climbing tower that cost me 200 credits. And he looks at me like I am a furniture salesman. It is your energy, Nara said, not looking up from the cat. You are too frenetic. You approach him like a problem to be fixed. Cats require consent. You must wait for them to come to you. I wait, Jonah protested. I sit there. I go psst, psst, psst. Nothing. Patch clearly has imprinted on you, Jonah added, narrowing his eyes playfully. He follows you to the bathroom. It is undignified. Patch imprints on whoever feeds him the wet food at exactly 6 in the morning, Nara countered, looking up with a smirk. Which says a lot about your punctuality, Jonah. You are consistently 10 minutes late, Jonah laughed. Ouch, harsh, but fair. He sat down on the floor next to her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. He watched her hand move through the cat's fur. You have nice hands, Jonah said abruptly. Then he turned pink. I mean steady, skilled, not weird. Sorry. Nara paused. She looked at her hands, the gray fur, the slightly longer fingers, the retractable claws she kept carefully sheathed. To most humans, they were alien. To the Council, they were dangerous tools. They are just hands, she said. No, Jonah said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the joking edge. They are kind hands. I saw what you did at the clinic. I saw how you touched him. You were not just fixing a machine. You were connecting. He looked at her, his dark eyes serious. My wife Sarah, she was brilliant, but she was all head. Science, logic, data. She loved us, but she struggled to just be. You have a stillness in you, Nara. It is rare. Nara felt a flush of heat rise under her fur. She wanted to lean into him. She wanted to bridge the 6 inches of space between them. But the voice of High Healer Sarek whispered in her ear, You are a dissonance. I am not what you think, she said, pulling her hand away from the cat. I am flawed, Jonah. Broken. We are all broken, Nara, Jonah said. That is how the light gets in. Or the spores, depending on the season. He was trying to make a joke again to lighten the mood, but the air remained charged. Suddenly a flash of light illuminated the room, casting long, sharp shadows against the wall. It was followed by another, and then another. Whoa! Finch yelled from his bedroom. Dad, the sky is falling! They rushed to the balcony. Outside the thick glass of the station's viewport, the universe was putting on a show. A meteor shower was passing through the upper atmosphere of the planet below. But these were not normal meteors. They burned with a brilliant iridescent violet flame. As they burned up, they left behind trailing clouds of shimmering dust that hung in the vacuum like glowing curtains. The Perseid 7 cluster, Nora said, appearing with her datapad. Rich in ionized heavy metals and strange organic compounds. It is beautiful, Nara whispered. The light reflected in her wide amber eyes. Yeah, Jonah said. He wasn't looking at the meteors. He was looking at Nara. Beautiful. For a moment, standing there in the purple light, Nara allowed herself to imagine a future where she stayed. Where she stood on this balcony every night. Where the 3 days never ran out. But as she watched, she noticed something disturbing. The glowing dust from the meteors wasn't just dissipating. It was clinging to the station's outer shields. And where the station's ventilation intakes churned, sucking in the processed atmosphere, the dust seemed to be swirling, drawn in like moths to a flame. A shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The trouble started 12 hours later. It began with the birds in the station's aviary. They stopped singing. Then, they began to fly into the glass walls, repetitive dull thuds that unnerved the passers-by. Then the cats in the residential sector began to howl. It wasn't the sound of fighting. It was a low, mournful keen, a sound of disorientation. Nara was in the kitchen making tea when she heard Patch. He was in the living room, staring at the wall. He let out a yowl that sounded like a distorted radio frequency. Patch. Nara moved to him quickly. The cat looked at her, but his eyes were not focusing. His pupils were blown wide, encompassing the entire iris. He swayed as if drunk. Nara knelt and reached out with her senses. She did not use the full purr, just a passive scan. What she felt made her recoil. Inside the cat, there was a noise. It was a biological static. It felt like sand in the gears. It was a dissonance, a chaotic frequency that was disrupting the neural pathways. And it felt familiar. It felt exactly like the unstable resonance the Council claimed she emitted. Her heart stopped. Is it me? She thought, panic rising in her throat. Did I do this? Did I infect him when I healed him? Is my presence leaking radiation into this house? She backed away from the cat, terrified. Nara. Jonah walked in holding his arm. He looked pale. Hey, are you okay? You look like you saw a ghost. The cat, Nara whispered. He is unwell. Everyone is unwell today, Jonah grimaced. Must be something in the water. Listen, do you have any of that medical goop? I had a little mishap at the farm. He held out his arm. The sleeve of his jumpsuit was burned away, and the skin beneath was red and blistering. Jonah, Nara forgot her fear instantly. She rushed to him. What happened? Pressure valve blew, Jonah hissed as she guided him to a chair. Steam burn. Nothing major, but it stings like a beast. This is second degree, Nara said, examining the wound. Her professional demeanor snapped into place. I need to cool the tissue and stimulate rapid cell turnover to prevent scarring. She ran to the bathroom and grabbed the first aid kit, but she knew the standard gel would be too slow to stop the pain. Jonah was biting his lip sweat, beading on his forehead. She had to help him. This will feel strange, Nara said. She placed her hands over the burn, hovering just an inch above the skin. She took a deep breath and found the hum. She kept it low. She did not let the light flare. She just sent a targeted wave of cool, stabilizing resonance into the nerve endings. Quiet, she told the pain receptors. Cool. Calm. Jonah gasped. His shoulders dropped. Oh wow. That feels like ice water and warm blankets at the same time. Nara worked for 5 minutes, knitting the worst of the damage. When she finished, the angry red had faded to a dull pink. She pulled back, exhausted. Jonah caught her hand. Nara, he said. His voice was husky. You are amazing. He looked at her, and the gratitude in his eyes was shifting into something else. Desire. He leaned in, just a fraction. Nara's breath hitched. She could smell him, the sweat, the musk, the underlying kindness. She wanted to lean forward. She wanted to press her forehead against his. But then Patch yowled again from the corner, a sound of pure misery. The reminder was like a slap. You are dangerous. You are anomaly. Nara yanked her hand away and stood up, knocking the chair back. I cannot, she said, her voice trembling. Nara, wait, Jonah said, looking hurt. I didn't mean to. You do not understand, Nara cried. The cat. The birds on the news. It is the resonance. It is a dissonance frequency. The council said I carry it. They said I would disrupt the biology around me. She pointed at Patch. I touched him. Now he is sick. I touched you. What if I make you sick too? What if I am the plague, Jonah? Nara, stop. Jonah stood up, ignoring his arm. That is crazy. You healed me. You healed Patch. Did I? Nara backed away toward the door. Or did I just rewrite you? Did I change you into something that matches my chaos? She turned and fled to her room, locking the door behind her. She sat on the bed, shaking, listening to the muffled sounds of Jonah trying to calm Patch in the other room. The next 24 hours were a descent into nightmare. The sickness did not stay with the animals. It started with a fever. By noon, the next day, reports were scrolling across the station's news feeds. Unknown pathogen affecting station pets. Then, quarantine protocols initiated in Sector 7. Nara stayed in her room, refusing to come out, terrified that she was the epicenter. She spent the hours scanning her own biodata with a portable med scanner she had stolen from the clinic. The results were confusing. Her resonance levels were high, yes, but they were stable. Then came the knock on the door. It wasn't Jonah. It was Nora. Nara, the girl's voice was small, scared. Dad says to leave you alone, but it is Finch. Nara unlocked the door instantly. Nora stood there hugging herself. He is really hot, and he is making a sound like Patch. Nara pushed past her and ran to the boy's room. Jonah was sitting on the bed holding Finch. The little boy was burning up. His skin was flushed a deep, unhealthy red. His eyes were rolling back in his head. And from his chest came a sound, a high-pitched wheezing whine that matched the frequency of the sick animals perfectly. He just collapsed, Jonah said, looking up at Nara with eyes full of terror. I called the medics, but the lines were jammed. They say there are hundreds of cases. Nara helped him. Nara froze. It is spreading to humans. To children. She approached the bed. She placed a hand on Finch's forehead. She expected to feel her own chaotic signature. She expected to confirm her guilt, but she didn't. As she scanned Finch's biofield, she felt the dissonance, yes. But underneath it she felt something else. A foreign presence. Something that tasted like metal and ozone. She looked at the window. The station's shield generator was humming loudly outside. The dust from the meteor shower was still clinging to the glass, glowing faintly violet. Nara realized it in a flash. "It is not me," she whispered. "What?" Jonah asked, wiping Finch's face with a wet cloth. "The sickness," Nara said, her mind racing. "It is not me. It is the spores. The dust from the meteors. It is entering the ventilation. It is a psychoactive particulate. It disrupts the neurological frequency of anything with a high sensitivity to biorhythms." "Cats," Nora said from the doorway. "Cats are sensitive." "And children," Nara added. "Especially children like Finch who have receptive nervous systems." "Can you stop it?" Jonah pleaded. "Nara, I do not care what it is. Can you fix him?" Nara looked at the boy. The dissonance in his body was a storm. To fix it, she would have to enter that storm. She would have to use a resonance stronger than the spores. She would have to use the full channel. If she did that, the energy signature would be massive. It would be like lighting a flare in a dark room. The sensors on the station would pick it up instantly. The health board would know exactly where she was. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A message from the Lycerin Council liaison subject, Nara. "You have 24 hours remaining for mandatory evaluation. Failure to comply will result in arrest and forced sterilization. Location tracking active." She looked at the message. She looked at Finch, who was gasping for air. "If I do this," Nara said, her voice quiet and terrifyingly calm, "they will find me. The energy release will trigger every alarm on this deck." Jonah looked at the phone in her hand, then at his dying son. He stood up and grabbed Nara's shoulders. "If they come," Jonah said fiercely, "let them come. We will fight them. But right now, I need you to save my son. Please. Come home with us, Nara. Be the mother he needs right now." Nara looked into his eyes. She saw the love there. She saw the trust. At that moment, the station's internal siren began to wail. "Attention. Attention. Biological hazard detected. Level 5. Alert. All residents remain indoors. This is not a drill." Patch, lying at the foot of the bed, seized violently. Finch arched his back, screaming a silent scream. Nara dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor screen up, counting down the hours. "Hold him," Nara commanded, her voice, changing, deepening into the tone of the Star Weavers of old. "Hold him tight, Jonah. This is going to be loud." She closed her eyes and began to hum. The room began to vibrate, and the light began to rise. The scream that tore from Finch's throat was not the sound of a child. It was the sound of a structure collapsing under a weight it was never meant to bear. In the dim light of the bedroom, the air itself seemed to fracture. The glass of the windowpane rattled in its frame, vibrating against the vacuum of space outside, responding to a frequency that human ears could barely register, but which made Nara's teeth ache deep in her jaw. "He is burning up!" Jonah shouted, his voice cracking with a panic that stripped away his usual layer of deflection and humor. "Nara, do something, he is burning." Finch arched off the mattress. His small body, rigid eyes, rolled back to show the terrifying whites. At the foot of the bed, Patch was no longer a cat. He was a conduit of agony. The animal yowled a distorted metallic screech that harmonized with Finch's gasps, creating a feedback loop of biological dissonance. Nara threw herself onto the bed. "Hold his shoulders. Do not let him bite his tongue." She reached for the medical kit she had stolen from the clinic, her hands moving with the desperate speed of a soldier under fire. She snapped a vial of fever reducer jamming it into the auto-injector, and pressed it against Finch's neck. Hiss. The drug entered his system. Nothing happened. Usually, the chemical dampeners would lower a fever within 30 seconds. But Finch's skin remained hot enough to blister. The red flush on his cheeks was deepening to a bruised purple. The spores were not just in his blood. They were in his bioelectric field, rewriting the rhythm of his heart. "It is not working," Jonah whispered, looking at the vitals monitor on Nara's datapad. The heart rate was climbing. 200 beats per minute, 210. "Why is it not working?" "Because it is not a virus," Nara said, throwing the empty injector aside. "It is a resonance. His body is trying to sing a song that is tearing him apart." Patch convulsed again, and the bedside lamp exploded. The bulb shattered outward, showering the floor in glass. "They are linked," Nora said from the doorway. She was clutching her datapad, her face pale behind her glasses. "The cat and Finch. The wave patterns are identical. They are amplifying each other." Nara looked at the boy. Then she looked at the cat. Then she looked at Jonah. If she did what was necessary, she would light up the station's sensors like a supernova. The council would know. The High Healer would come. Her life as a free individual would end. She looked at Finch's face, twisted in pain. There is no choice, she realized. There never was. "Jonah," Nara said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming something ancient and heavy. "Step back. Do not touch him. Do not touch me." "Nara, what?" "I said move." Jonah scrambled back, pulling Nora with him. Nara climbed onto the bed. She did not lean over Finch. She straddled the space between the boy and the cat, placing one hand on the child's solar plexus and the other on the animal's flank. She closed her eyes and stopped holding back. For 6 months, she had lived in a state of suppression, keeping the dam raised against the river of her power. Now, she broke the dam. She opened the resonant channel. It did not begin with sound. It began with pressure. The air in the room suddenly became heavy, dense with potential energy. Then the light came. It poured from Nara's skin, not the soft glow of the clinic, but a blinding, incandescent white-gold radiance that turned her gray fur into a silhouette of pure energy. The purr started. It was loud. It was a physical force. It hit Jonah in the chest, like the bass from a concert speaker. It shook the pictures off the walls. It was a command spoken in the language of cells and mitochondria. Stillness. Nara visualized the chaos inside Finch, the jagged, spiky red noise of the spores. She pushed her own song into him, a sweeping oceanic wave of blue light and deep, steady rhythm. She grabbed the dissonance and forced it to synchronize with her. The light emanating from her body bridged the gap between Finch and Patch. A visible arc of energy, like liquid lightning, flowed from the cat through Nara and into the boy, completing a circuit. Finch gasped, his back arching one last time, and then he collapsed back onto the pillows. The purple flush vanished instantly. His breathing slowed. Patch stopped screaming and slumped into a deep sleep. Nara held the connection for 10 seconds longer, cementing the stabilization before she cut the flow. The light vanished. The room plunged back into semi-darkness. Nara fell sideways, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Finch," Jonah crawled forward. He touched his son's face. "He is cool. He is sleeping." He looked up at Nara. His eyes were wide, filled with awe and terror. "Nara, that was a beacon," Nara wheezed, wiping a trickle of blood from her nose. "I just announced myself to every sensor within 1,000 miles. As if on cue, the apartment's communication panel chimed. It was not a call. It was an override. The holographic screen flickered to life in the living room. It projected a symbol that made Nara's blood turn to ice, the golden eye of Lysara. A voice, smooth as silk and cold as deep space, filled the apartment. "Subject Nara identified," the voice said. "Location confirmed. Residential Sector 9, Unit 4 Beta. Remain where you are. Resistance will be considered an act of biological terrorism. Nara squeezed her eyes shut. They are here. 10 minutes. That was all the time they had, before the heavy tread of boots sounded in the corridor. Jonah had tried to get Nara to hide in the ventilation shafts. He had tried to pack a bag. He had even grabbed a large wrench, though he looked ridiculous holding it. "Put it down, Jonah," Nara said, sitting on the edge of the sofa. She had composed herself. She had smoothed her fur. If she was going to end, she would do it with dignity. "You cannot fight a high healer with a wrench." The door did not slide open. It was forced open by an override key. 3 guards in ceremonial armor stepped in their faces, hidden behind sleek, faceless helms. They carried suppression staves, weapons designed to scramble nerve endings without drawing blood. Behind them walked a figure who needed no armor. High healer Sarek was tall, even for a Felidari. His robes were pristine white, embroidered with threads of real platinum. He leaned on a staff made of polished bone. His eyes were milky white, sightless. Yet he turned his head and looked directly at Nara, as if he could see the heat of her fear. "Nara," Sarek said. His voice was a low purr, but it carried no comfort. "You have made a great deal of noise for someone trying to be forgotten." "High healer," Nara said, bowing her head slightly, an instinct she hated herself for following. "And look at the mess you have made," Sarek continued, stepping into the messy living room. He wrinkled his nose at the smell of burnt electronics and cayenne pepper. "We warned you. We told you that your dissonance would bring ruin." "I saved him," Nara said, pointing to the bedroom where Finch slept. "The boy was dying. The spores—" "The spores," Sarek laughed softly. It was a dry, scratching sound. "You think this plague is from the spores, you arrogant child. The spores are inert. They are harmless dust, until they come into contact with a catalyst." He pointed a long, clawed finger at her. "You are the catalyst. Your unstable genetic resonance agitated the particulate matter. You woke up to the dormant biology of the meteor dust. You did not save the boy, Nara. You poisoned him. You poisoned this entire station." Nara recoiled, as if struck. "No, that is a lie. I felt it. The dissonance was foreign. I countered it." "You fed it," Sarek corrected smoothly. "And now, to clean up your spill, we must take drastic measures." He turned his blind gaze toward Jonah, who was standing in front of the children's bedroom door, the wrench still in his hand, looking pale, but furious. "You are the harborer," Sarek said to Jonah. "Because of your negligence, because you sheltered a fugitive biological agent, your family is now contaminated. I am authorized to order a Level 1 quarantine for this entire residential block. You, your children, your neighbors, you will be sealed in. No medical aid in or out until the infection burns itself out." "You cannot do that," Jonah said, his voice shaking with rage. "My son needs a doctor, not a prison cell." "Your son is collateral damage," Sarek said indifferently. "Guards, secure the female. We will begin the extraction. Once she is removed, we will seal the doors." "No," Nara stepped forward. "I will go. Take me. Just leave them alone. Do not seal the block, please." "Your surrender is already mandatory," Sarek sneered. "You have no bargaining chips." 2 guards stepped forward, grabbing Nara by the arms. She did not fight. She went limp, accepting her fate. If her leaving saved the children, it was enough. "Hey!" The shout came from Jonah. He did not use the wrench. He dropped it. He stepped right up to Sarek, invading the high healer's personal space. Jonah Reed was a mechanic, a man of grease and soil, standing toe-to-toe with an alien aristocrat. "Let her go," Jonah said. "You speak out of turn, human," Sarek said. "She didn't cause this," Jonah said, pointing a trembling finger at Sarek's chest. "I know how machines work. I know how systems fail. And I watched her. She didn't feed the fire, she put it out. My son was dying before she touched him. She is the only reason he is breathing right now." You are emotional. You are irrational, Sarek dismissed him. And you are a liar, Jonah snapped. You didn't come here to stop a plague. You came here because you were scared. You are scared because she can do things you can't. You want to cut her open and take away what makes her special because it makes you feel small. The room went deadly silent. Jonah, stop, Nara whispered. He will hurt you. Let him try, Jonah said, his eyes blazing. But I am not letting you take her. Not after she saved my family. You say she is a danger. I say she is a miracle. And if you want to take her, you are going to have to go through me. And then you are going to have to explain to station security why you are kidnapping a registered employee of the Aurora Spindle during a medical emergency. Sarek's lip curled back, revealing sharp teeth. Station security has no jurisdiction over Felidari internal affairs. At that moment, the comlink on Sarek's wrist beeped urgently. High Healer, a voice crackled. Report from the medbay. The infection has jumped vectors. It is in the neonatal ward. The incubators are failing. 20 infants are in critical condition. The staff cannot stabilize them. Sarek froze. His ear twitched. Nara's head snapped up. The neonatal ward. The resonance is spreading, Sarek muttered, looking truly rattled for the first time. It is accelerating. We must evacuate the purebloods and leave the station. You are running, Jonah asked, incredulous. You are the healers, and you are running, Nara pulled free from the guards. They were too distracted by the news to hold her tight. I can save them, Nara said. Her voice was clear, ringing like a bell. Sarek turned to her. You will only make it worse. No, Nara said. I know the frequency now. I felt it inside Finch. It is a specific dissonance pattern. If I can broadcast the counter-frequency, the inverse wave, I can neutralize the spores instantly. All of them. Across the whole station. Broadcast, Sarek scoffed. You cannot touch 1,000 patients at once. I do not need to touch them, Nara said. She looked at Nora, who was standing in the corner. Nora, the station's public address system, the emergency speakers, are they analog or digital? Nora pushed her glasses up. Hybrid. They run on a copper wire backup grid. They reach every room, every corridor, every vent. If I can get to the central hub, Nara said, turning to Jonah. If I can plug into the array, I can sing into the system. I can amplify the purr. I can create a resonance field that covers the entire spindle. Madness, Sarek spat. The energy required would incinerate your neural pathways. You would burn out your mind. Maybe, Nara said. She looked at Jonah. But it will save the babies. Jonah looked at her. He saw the resolve in her face. He saw the terrifying, beautiful courage. Okay, Jonah said. He turned to Sarek. Get out of our way. Sarek raised his staff. I forbid this. Oh, shut up, you old dust mop, a new voice boomed from the hallway. Dr. Amina strode in. She was the station's chief medical officer, a woman built like a tank wearing a lab coat stained with 3 different colors of alien blood. She was flanked by 2 station security officers who looked much bigger than Sarek's ceremonial guards. Dr. Amina, Nara gasped. I heard the commotion, Amina said, glaring at Sarek. And I heard the plan. High Healer under maritime law of deep space during a Class 5 epidemic, the chief medical officer has absolute authority. You are interfering with my medical staff. She is a fugitive, Sarek shrieked. She is a consultant, Amina corrected smoothly. And right now, she is our only shot. Officers escort the High Healer to the VIP lounge. Give him some tea. Lock the door. You will regret this, Sarek hissed, as the security officers grabbed him. She will destroy you all. As they dragged the High Healer away, Amina turned to Nara. You better be right about this kid, because if you are wrong, we all die screaming. I am right, Nara said. She looked at Jonah. We have to go, now. The run to the central communications hub was a blur of flashing red lights and the sound of screaming sirens. They moved as a unit. Jonah carried Finch, who was wrapped in a blanket too weak to walk, but refusing to let go of Patch. Nara ran alongside them. Nora ran ahead hacking doors with her datapad. Dr. Amina brought up the rear barking orders into her headset. The central hub was a circular room filled with banks of servers and a massive holographic map of the station. The air conditioning was humming loudly, trying to cool the overheating systems. "Here," Nora pointed to the main console. "This is the input for the station-wide emergency broadcast, but the gain is limited. It filters out non-verbal frequencies." "I can bypass the filter," Nora said, her fingers flying across the keys. "I just need to reroute the audio drivers through the maintenance channel." "Do it," Nara said. She sat in the operator's chair. Her hands were shaking. She felt cold, so cold. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the fear. She looked at the microphone. It was a simple piece of plastic and metal. It looked too small to save a world. "Nara," Jonah put a hand on her shoulder. He had set Finch and Patch down on a coat pile in the corner. "Look at me." She looked up at him. His face was smeared with soot. His hair was a disaster, and he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "You do not have to do this alone," Jonah said. "I am right here. I am your anchor." "Okay." "I might not come back from this, Jonah," Nara whispered. Sarek was right about one thing. The feedback loop, it might fry my brain. I might forget who I am. I might forget you. "Then I will remind you," Jonah said fiercely. "I will tell you the story every day until you remember. I will tell you about the spicy stew. I will tell you about the cat. I will tell you about how you looked in the purple light." "Ready," Nora shouted. "Bypass active. The system lives in 3-2-1. Nara closed her eyes. She gripped the arms of the chair. She didn't just purr. She reached into the core of her being, into the genetic memory of the Starweavers, the ancestors who had sung to the void and made it bloom. She pulled every ounce of bioenergy she had left. She leaned into the microphone and let it out. The sound that came out of the station speakers in the mess hall, in the cargo bays, in the residential blocks, in the neonatal ward was not a sound. It was a feeling. It was the feeling of a mother's heartbeat. It was the vibration of a cat sleeping on your chest. It was warm honey and sunlight. On the screens, the red zones of infection began to blink. Nara gasped. The resistance was immense. She could feel the spores fighting back a million tiny screams in her head. It felt like being flayed alive. "She is seizing," Amina shouted, looking at the biometric scanner. "Her heart rate is critical. She is going into cardiac arrest." "Keep going, Nara," Jonah yelled. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it so hard his knuckles turned white. "Don't let go. Hold on to me." "It is working," Nora screamed, pointing at the map. "Look at Sector 7. The bio readings are stabilizing, the fever is breaking." But Nara was fading. The light around her fur was flickering, turning from gold to a dull, sputtering gray. She was being consumed by the dissonance she was trying to cure. The darkness was closing in. It was easier to let go. It was easier to just drift into the silence. "Let go," the darkness whispered. "You are just a broken tool." "Nara," Jonah's voice cut through the dark. "Don't you dare leave me. I love you, you stubborn cat nurse. Do you hear me? I love you." Nara's eyes flew open. They were glowing with a terrifying, blinding light. "Also," Jonah yelled, tears streaming down his face, "the kids might unionize if you leave. I cannot handle the paperwork." A laugh, a tiny, hysterical human laugh, bubbled up in Nara's chest. It was the tether she needed. She squeezed Jonah's hand back. She drew strength from him, from his absurdity, from his love. She drew strength from Finch, who was humming along in the corner. She drew strength from Patch, who was purring in harmony. She poured it all into the microphone. Boom! A shockwave of pure white resonance blasted through the station. It shattered the windows in the observation deck. It blew out the lights in the corridors, and it silenced the spores. Instantly, across the Aurora spindle, the fever broke. The crying babies in the ward fell asleep. The cats stopped yowling. The birds in the aviary landed on their perches and tucked their heads under their wings. In the comm hub, the silence was deafening. Nara slumped forward. The light left her fur. Her hand slipped from Jonah's grip. She hit the floor with a dull, heavy thud. "Nara!" Jonah dropped to his knees. He turned her over. She was not breathing. Her fur was dull, lifeless. Her eyes were closed. "Medic!" Jonah screamed, his voice breaking. "Amina, help her!" Dr. Amina was already there, ripping open an emergency kit. "Charging defibrillator. Nora, get the oxygen move." Jonah held Nara's limp hand, pressing it to his cheek, rocking back and forth. Come on, you promised. Just for a few nights. You promised." The recovery room in the medical sector was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of the life support monitor. Nara lay in the bed looking small and fragile against the white sheets. There were tubes running into her arms. A complex sensor array was strapped to her head. Jonah sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to the bed. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. He was holding Nara's hand, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. Finch was asleep on a cot in the corner, with Patch curled up on top of him. Nora was sitting on the floor reading a medical textbook, looking up every 30 seconds to check the monitors. Outside the glass door, a heated argument was taking place. Jonah could see High Healer Sarek looking disheveled and furious, pointing his staff at Dr. Amina. Amina stood with her arms crossed, looking like a stone wall that had no intention of moving. The door slid open, and Amina stepped in, looking exhausted. "Is she—" Jonah started. "She is stable," Amina said, checking the chart. "But her energy levels are practically zero. She drained herself dry, Jonah. I have never seen a Felidari survive a discharge like that." "But will she wake up?" "Eventually," Amina said. She looked at the door. "But we have a problem. Sarek is demanding custody. He says she is a planetary asset now. He says the cure proves she belongs to the Council." "He can go float himself out of an airlock," Jonah growled. "I told him that in more professional terms." Amina smiled grimly. "I told him she is under station medical quarantine for observation. It buys us time. But he is contacting Lisara. He is bringing a warship." Jonah looked at Nara. He brushed a stray hair from her forehead. "Let them bring a fleet," Jonah said softly. "She is not going anywhere. She is home." Suddenly the monitor beeped a faster rhythm. Nara's eyelids fluttered. A low, raspy sound came from her throat. It wasn't a purr. It was a word. Jonah squeezed her hand, tears welling in his eyes. "I am here. We are all here." Nara opened her eyes. They were no longer amber. They were a swirling deep violet, the color of the meteor storm, the color of the galaxy. She looked at him, and a weak, tired smile touched her lips. "You shouted," she whispered hoarsely. "You said the kids would unionize." Jonah laughed, a choked, watery sound. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I did, and I meant it. The negotiations would be brutal." Nara closed her eyes again, but her breathing was steady. "Then I suppose I must stay." As she drifted back to sleep, Jonah looked out the window. The station was peaceful. The stars were shining. But down the corridor, he could see Sarek pacing like a caged tiger. The sickness was gone. But the war for Nara's life had just begun. The silence in the recovery room was not empty. It was heavy, with the specific dense gravity of survival. Nara drifted up from the darkness, not with a gasp, but with a slow, reluctant surfacing. The first thing she registered was weight. There was a warm, vibrating mass centered on her sternum. She opened her eyes, blinking against the harsh white of the medical lights, and looked down. Patch was asleep on her chest. The orange and white tomcat was splayed out in a posture of total abandonment, his paws kneading the air in his sleep, his purr resonating through her ribcage like a second heart. Nara took a breath. Her lungs felt clear. The burning sensation that had scoured her neural pathways during the broadcast was gone, replaced by a strange, hollow ache. It was the feeling of a riverbed after the floodwaters had receded, scoured clean, deepened, and waiting. She shifted slightly, and the movement drew her attention to the rest of the room. Jonah Reed was asleep in a plastic visitor's chair that looked designed to inflict spinal damage. His head was lolling back at an impossible angle, his mouth slightly open, a line of drool threatening to escape. He looked exhausted, unshaven, and utterly defenseless. On the floor, Nora and Finch were surrounded by a sea of paper. They were quiet, likely under strict orders, but their industry was evident. They had taped drawings to the metal rails of Nora's bed. They were all variations of the same theme, a gray figure with glowing eyes, standing atop a tower, surrounded by rainbows that were presumably sound waves. The guardian angel cat, one caption read in messy crayon. Nara the Loud read another in Nora's precise block lettering. Nara felt a stinging in her eyes. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and brushed the top of Finch's head. The boy woke instantly. He didn't startle. He just lifted his head and looked at her with wide, serious eyes. "You are awake," Finch whispered. "Dad said we had to be quiet because your batteries were recharging." "My batteries are much better," Nara whispered back, her voice raspy but functional. Jonah snorted in his sleep, jerked upright, and blinked rapidly. Who's there? I didn't touch the thermostat." He saw Nara looking at him. The confusion vanished, replaced by a relief so raw it made Nara want to look away. "Hey," Jonah said softly, leaning forward. "Welcome back to the land of the living." "How long?" Nara asked. 2 days, Jonah said. "You really know how to take a nap." "The station." "Still spinning," Jonah said. "Quiet." The fever broke Nara, everywhere. "The neonatal ward is stable. The cats are back to ignoring their owners." "You did it." Nara closed her eyes, letting the information settle. She reached inside herself, searching for the chaotic dissonance that had defined her life for so long. It was gone. In its place was something else, a hum that was lower, slower, and vastly more powerful. It felt like the difference between a rushing stream and a deep subterranean aquifer. She had not lost her power. She had become the vessel for it. The door to the room slid open with a soft hiss. Dr. Amina stepped in, holding a data pad. She looked tired, but triumphant. "I see our sleeping beauty has decided to rejoin us," Amina said, checking the monitors. "Your vitals are terrifyingly normal for someone who just acted as a biological amplifier for a city-sized broadcast." "Am I free to go?" Nara asked. Amina exchanged a look with Jonah. The air in the room shifted. The warmth of the family reunion cooled slightly under the shadow of politics. "Physically, yes," Amina said. "Legally, it is complicated." "Sarek," Nara guessed. "The High Healer is currently in a diplomatic standoff with the station authority," Amina explained, pulling up a chair. "He cannot arrest you. Not anymore. The footage of you saving the station has been viewed 3 million times. You are a hero, Nara. If he tries to drag you off to a sterilization chamber, the residents of Aurora Spindle will riot. We have already had people leaving flowers at the clinic door." "But," Nara prompted. "But the council does not let go of its property," Jonah said, his voice hard. "They have changed tactics. They sent a formal request this morning. They are dropping the sterilization order. Instead, they are offering you a position. Specialist in resonance therapy. They want you to come back to Lysara, voluntary service, under their supervision, of course." Nara felt a cold chill settle in her stomach. "They want to study me. They want to harness what I did." "Exactly," Amina said. "They realized you are not a bomb. You are a power plant. And they want the keys." "I will not go," Nara said quietly. "We know," Jonah said. He reached out and covered her hand with his. His palm was calloused and warm. "And you don't have to. You are discharged into my care. Doctor's orders. Recovery in a low-stress environment. That means my couch, my bad cooking, and 0 inspectors. It is a temporary shield, Amina warned. Sarek is playing the long game. But for now, get out of here. Go home. Walking out of the medical center was an ordeal Nara was not prepared for. She had expected scrutiny. She had not expected reverence. As Jonah guided her through the main atrium toward the transit tubes, people stopped. A group of dock workers, rough men with grease-stained skin, went silent and nodded at her. A mother, holding a baby, one of the infants from the ward, perhaps burst into tears and tried to approach only for Jonah to gently intercept her. She needs rest, folks, Jonah kept saying, acting as a human shield. Show's over. Nothing to see here but a very tired cat. Nara kept her head down, her ears flattened. She hated this. She hated the awe in their eyes. On Lysara she had been a pariah. Here she was becoming an icon. Both were dehumanizing. Both stripped her of the right to be just a person who liked warm sunlight and hated cold tea. "Don't look at them," Jonah murmured in her ear, his arm hovering protectively around her shoulders, without quite touching. "Just look at my ugly shirt. Focus on the stain. It is marinara sauce from Tuesday." Nara let out a small, breathless laugh and focused on the stain. It grounded her. When the door to Jonah's apartment finally slid shut behind them, the silence was a physical relief. The familiar smell of potting soil, ozone, and old books washed over her. "Home," Finch declared, dropping his backpack and immediately putting on his shark onesie. "Home," Nara echoed, leaning against the doorframe. Her legs felt weak. "Okay, protocol is in effect," Jonah announced. "Nara takes the bed. I take the couch. Nora handles communication, blackout, no news feeds. Finch handles morale." "I am on it," Finch said, saluting. For the next week, the apartment became a sanctuary, a bubble of domesticity floating in a hostile universe. Recovery was slow. Nara found that while her resonance was deep, her physical stamina was shattered. She spent the mornings on the balcony soaking up the artificial sunlight from the station's mirrors, while Patch sat on the railing beside her, acting as a furry sentinel. It was during these quiet hours that the bond between them solidified, not as a dramatic explosion of romance, but as a series of small, interlocking habits. One afternoon, Nara found Finch trying to nap on the rug. He was twisted into a knot, looking uncomfortable. "You are doing it wrong," Nara said, sliding off the sofa to sit beside him. "I am trying to be a loaf," Finch grumbled. "Like Patch. But my elbows stick out." "Humans have terrible geometry for loafing," Nara observed. "Your center of gravity is too high. Here." She gently adjusted his limbs, tucking his arms under his chest and turning his head to the side. "You must relax the trapezius muscles. Imagine your bones are turning to liquid. You are not holding the floor. The floor is holding you." Finch sighed, his body going limp. "Oh, that is better." "Nara." "Yes, Finch. Are you going to stay forever?" The question hung in the sunlit dust motes. Nara stroked the boy's hair, her claws fully sheathed. "Forever is a long time, little shark. But I am here now." "Dad wants you to stay forever," Finch mumbled, his eyes closing. "He talks to Patch about it when he thinks we are sleeping." Nara froze. She looked toward the kitchen where Jonah was clattering pans. Her heart did a traitorous little flip. Later that day, Nora approached her with a data pad. The girl was hesitant, which was rare for her. "I have been monitoring the station's atmospheric sensors," Nora said, sitting down at the kitchen table opposite Nara. "Since the broadcast." "And?" Nara asked, bracing herself for bad news. "The spores are not gone," Nora said. "They didn't disappear. You changed them." She turned the screen around. It showed a microscopic image of the violet dust. Before, the particles had been jagged, aggressive shapes. Now, they were smooth, interlocking spheres. "They have integrated into the station's Moss filters," Nora explained, her eyes shining with scientific curiosity. They are metabolizing carbon dioxide at 3 times the rate of the native plants. Nara, you didn't just neutralize the threat. You adapted it. The station's air quality is the best it has been in 20 years. Nara stared at the screen. I sang them into harmony. It is incredible, Nora whispered. It suggests that your genome is not just reactive. It is diplomatic. Biological diplomacy. Keep this to yourself, Nora, Nara said sharply. Nora blinked. Why, this proves you are beneficial. This proves I am a terraforming tool, Nara corrected. If the Council knows I can clean atmospheres and optimize ecosystems, they will never let me go. They will hook me up to a machine and use me to scrub polluted planets until I die of exhaustion. Nora's face fell. She understood. Oh, okay. I will encrypt the data, deep storage. Project Boring Algae Study. Thank you, Nora said. She reached out and squeezed the girl's hand. Nora squeezed back, fierce and loyal. That evening, Jonah attempted to make tea. I found a recipe on the extranet, Jonah announced proudly, placing a steaming mug in front of Nara. Lycerin sun tea, supposed to taste like amber and memory. Nara looked at the liquid. It was a murky brown. It smelled faintly of burnt socks and optimism. She took a sip. It was objectively terrible. He had clearly substituted the rare Lycerin krill root with dried dandelion and possibly engine coolant. Well, Jonah asked, rocking on his heels, looking terrified. It is, Nara swallowed, fighting the urge to gag. It is very close, Jonah. Thank you, Jonah beamed. I knew it, I have a refined palate. He sat down next to her on the sofa. They were close. His knee brushed against hers. The apartment was quiet. The kids were asleep. The tension that had been simmering all week began to boil. Nara, Jonah said, his voice dropping to that serious, husky register that made her insides flutter. We need to talk about the elephant in the room. Or the high heeler in the lobby. I know, Nara said, looking into her mug. You have a choice to make, Jonah said. Amina says the offer from Lysara is open. You could go back. You would be a hero. You would be safe from the knives at least. I would be a prisoner, Nara said. A pampered prisoner, but a prisoner. And here, Jonah asked. Here I am a target, Nara said. She turned to face him. Jonah, do you not see? As long as I am here, Sarek will not stop. He will find a legal loophole. He will blockade the station. He will hurt you to get to me. Staying here is selfish. Selfish? Jonah laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. Nara, look at this place. Look at my kids. Before you came, we were just surviving. I was drowning, Nara. I was trying so hard to be everything for them, and I was failing. You didn't just save the cat. You brought the light back. He reached out and took the mug from her hands, setting it on the table. Then he took her hands in his. I don't want a guardian angel, Jonah said fiercely. I don't want a galactic hero. I want the woman who puts up with my bad cooking. I want the person who taught my son to sleep like a loaf of bread. I want you. Nara's breath hitched. You are a fool, Jonah Reed. I am, Jonah agreed. But I am right. He leaned in. Nara did not pull away. She leaned forward to meet him. The kiss was not explosive. It was not the desperate adrenaline-fueled connection of the climax. It was slow. It was gentle. It tasted of terrible tea and absolute certainty. It was a question asked and answered in the dark. When they pulled apart, Nara rested her forehead against his. She was trembling. I cannot leave, she whispered. I cannot. Good, Jonah said. Because I already gave you a key, and I am not changing the locks again. The peace, of course, could not last. The next morning, Dr. Amina contacted them. Her face on the comms screen was grim. Nara, I need you to come to the lab, Amina said. Privately. Leave the kids with a neighbor. What is it? Nara asked, feeling the cold dread return. Is it the spores? No, Amina said. It is your blood work. The deep scan results from the night of the broadcast finally finished processing. And And there is something there that shouldn't be, Amina said. I found a marker, a genetic sequence that hasn't been seen in the Felidari population for 3,000 years. Nara, this isn't just about resonance. This is about history. Nara looked at Jonah. He nodded, grabbing his jacket. We are going, Jonah said. They left the kids with Mrs. Gables down the hall, a kind woman who baked cookies, and asked no questions. The journey to the lab was tense. Nara wore a hood hiding her face from the few people they passed in the corridors. When they arrived at the med sector, Amina ushered them into a secure back room. It was filled with older equipment, dusty servers, and archaic scanning devices that looked like they belonged in a museum. Why are we here? Nara asked, looking at a massive brass and glass machine in the center of the room. This, Amina said, patting the machine, is a harmonic resonance analyzer. It is pre-war tech. We use it for dating archaeological finds. Modern scanners look for active pathogens. This thing looks for echoes. Amina brought up a hologram. It showed a double helix, but parts of it were glowing with a pulsating golden light. This is your DNA, Nara, Amina said. See those gold bands? Those are dormant intronic sequences. Junk DNA usually. But after you channeled the station's energy, they woke up. What are they? Jonah asked. They are data, Amina said. Biological storage. Nara, your ancestors didn't just sing to heal bones. They encoded information into their bloodlines. Memories, maps, warnings. Nara stepped closer to the hologram. She felt a strange pull, a vibration in her marrow that matched the pulsing light on the screen. Sarek knows, Nara whispered. The realization hit her like a physical blow. That is why the Council fears the anomaly. It is not a mutation. It is a memory. Exactly, Amina said. They have been breeding this gene out of your people for centuries. They want to erase the past. But somehow you are a throwback. A pristine copy of the original source code. What does the code say? Jonah asked. I don't know, Amina admitted. I can't read it. I'm human. The machine can't translate it. It needs a biological interface. She pointed to a brass plate on the side of the ancient machine. It was shaped like a hand with long fingers and claws. It needs you, Amina said to Nara. You have to complete the circuit. If you touch that, the machine will use your own resonance to unlock the data stored in your blood. Nara stared at the handprint. It was terrified. If she did this, there was no going back. She would know the truth. And the truth was often more dangerous than the lie. If I do this, Nara said, will it hurt? Probably, Amina said honestly. It will be like downloading an encyclopedia into your brain in 3 seconds. Nara looked at Jonah. You don't have to, Jonah said. We can walk away. We can go home and make more bad tea. Nara shook her head slowly. No, Sarek called me a corruption. He called me a mistake. I need to know what I really am. I need to know if I am a monster or something else. Okay, Jonah said. He stepped closer to her. I am right here. Nara took a deep breath. She reached out with her right hand. Her gray fur stood on end. The air in the room seemed to hum in anticipation. Ready, Nara whispered. She pressed her hand against the brass plate. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Finch and Nora were busy. The recipe says to layer the noodles, Nora instructed, reading from a data pad. Don't throw them. I am layering them quickly, Finch argued, tossing a sheet of pasta into the pan. They were making lasagna. A surprise for when Dad and Nara came back. It was messy, chaotic, and filled with love. Do you think she will like it? Finch asked, pausing to wipe tomato sauce on his onesie. Nara likes anything we make, Nora said, adjusting her glasses. Her serotonin levels increase by 14% when we engage in communal feeding rituals. She smiles, Finch translated. Yes, she smiles. Suddenly the door chimed. Nora frowned. Dad has a key. Nara has a key. She walked to the door and checked the monitor. Her blood ran cold. Standing in the hallway was not a neighbor. It was not a delivery bot. It was a tall, imposing figure in white robes. He leaned on a bone staff. He was alone, but his presence filled the corridor with a suffocating pressure. High Healer Sarek. He looked at the camera, his blind eyes, seeming to stare right through the metal door. "Children," Sarek said, his voice smooth and terrible. "I believe you and I have a great deal to discuss regarding your guest. Open the door." Nora backed away, grabbing Finch's hand. "Protocol," Nora whispered. "Finch, get under the bed. Now." "But the lasagna." "Go." As Finch scrambled away, Nora looked at the door. She was 12 years old. She was terrified. But she was a scientist and she was a Reed. She did not open the door. She grabbed her datapad and hit the emergency alert button, labeled Dad, back in the lab. Nara's hand connected with the metal. There was no pain. There was only light. Her mind was ripped out of the room, out of the station, out of time. She saw a planet, but it was not Lysara as she knew it. It was green lush, singing with life. She saw her people. They were not wearing white robes. They were not hiding in towers. They were standing in the forests, on the mountains and the oceans. They were singing. And answering them were others. Not Felidari. She saw giant crystalline entities floating in the clouds. She saw burrowing insectoids tilling the soil. She saw humans. Ancient humans arriving in primitive starships. The Felidari were not rulers. They were not pure. They were the weavers. They were the translators. Their resonance was the glue that allowed different species to coexist in the same ecosystem without rejecting each other. They calmed the predators, accelerated the crops, harmonized the atmosphere. And then she saw the betrayal. A faction rose up, the Purity Council. They wanted power. They didn't want to serve. They wanted to rule. They realized that by silencing the weavers, by cutting off the connection, they could create fear. Without the weavers, the species turned on each other. Chaos reigned, and the council stepped in to bring order. They rewrote history. They called the weavers corrupt. They called the connection dissonance. They sterilized the bloodlines. They blinded the species to their true purpose. Nara gasped, pulling her hand back. She stumbled, falling into Jonah's arms. "Nara!" Jonah caught her. "What did you see?" Nara looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, glowing with the violet light of the cosmos. Tears streamed down her face. "Everything," she whispered. "We are not sick, Jonah. We are the cure. We were never meant to be alone. We were meant to connect everyone." "The council," Amina started. "They are liars," Nara said, her voice hardening into steel. "They stole our voice so they could sell us their silence." Jonah's comms unit beeped frantically. A red light flashed. "Emergency alert, home base, Nora." Jonah went pale. "The kids." Nara felt the connection instantly. It wasn't just a beep. She could feel the fear. It was a sharp, jagged dissonance echoing from the apartment she now called home. "Sarek," Nara snarled. It was not a word. It was a growl. A true predatory sound that belonged to a creature who would tear the throat out of anyone who touched her pack. "He went to the house," Jonah shouted, already running for the door. "He made a mistake," Nara said, sprinting after him. The exhaustion was gone. Her body was flooded with the ancient power of the weavers. She was not running away anymore. She was going home, and she was bringing the storm with her. The run back to the apartment was not a journey of distance but of time. Every second that ticked by was a beat of Nara's heart, a drum thudding against her ribs. The revelations of the ancient laboratory of the Starweavers, the betrayal. The truth of her blood were a storm in her mind, but they were secondary. Right now, only one thing mattered: the pack. Jonah ran beside her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He didn't have her speed or her feline agility, but he had the terrifying, relentless momentum of a father who knew his children were in danger. They burst out of the transit lift onto their floor. The corridor was silent. Too silent. The door to Unit 4 Beta was closed. "Nora," Jonah shouted, slamming his hand against the panel. "Open up!" There was no answer. The lock was engaged, but not by the standard magnetic seal. It was a physical deadbolt. "Stand back," Nora said. Her voice was low, vibrating with a growl that made the hair on Jonah's arms stand up. She didn't use a key. She placed her palm flat against the metal. She didn't use the healing resonance. She used the other side of the frequency, the dissonance she had feared for so long, but now controlled. She visualized the molecular structure of the locking mechanism. She found the stress points. She pushed. Screech! The metal groaned, warped, and then the lock shattered with a sharp crack. The door slid open, half melted. They rushed inside. The apartment was not a scene of battle. It was unnervingly calm. High Healer Sarek sat in Jonah's favorite armchair, the one with the coffee stain on the armrest. He looked like a marble statue dropped into a messy kindergarten. His white robes were immaculate, contrasting sharply with the pile of laundry on the sofa next to him. On the floor, Nora and Finch sat cross-legged. They looked terrified, but unharmed. Patch was standing in front of them. His back arched, his tail, fluffed to 3 times its normal size, hissing steadily at the High Healer. "You are late," Sarek said calmly. He didn't look at Nara. His blind eyes were fixed on the hissing cat. "This creature is remarkably rude." "Get away from them," Jonah breathed, stepping forward to put himself between Sarek and the kids. "If you touch them—" "I have not touched them," Sarek said, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. "I merely came to collect what belongs to the Council, and to ensure no more unfortunate broadcasts occur." Nara stepped into the room. She did not shrink. She did not bow. She walked with the fluid, predatory grace of a starweaver. The violet light in her eyes had not faded. It had settled into a steady, dangerous burn. "You are in my home, Sarek," Nara said. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the room, pressing against the walls. "And you are threatening my family." "Your family," Sarek scoffed, though he shifted slightly in the chair. "These are humans. Short-lived, chaotic, biologically inferior. You are deluding yourself, Nara. You are a tool of the Felidari. A broken tool, perhaps, but one we must now secure." He stood up, tapping his bone staff on the floor. "The data you accessed in the lab. The broadcast. It proves you are too dangerous to be left free. You will return to Lysara. You will serve the Council. Or these humans will face the consequences of harboring a planetary threat." Nara laughed. It was a sound that stopped Sarek cold. It was the laugh of someone who had seen the man behind the curtain. "I know," Nara said. "You know what?" Sarek narrowed his eyes. "I know about the Weavers," Nara said, taking a step closer. "I know about the betrayal. I know that my dissonance is not a sickness. It is the original song. And I know why you are really afraid." She gestured to Jonah, to the children, to the cat. "You are not afraid of chaos," Nara said. "You are afraid of connection. You are afraid because for 3,000 years you have told our people that we must be pure, that we must be separate. But the truth is, we were made to bind the galaxy together." Sarek's face twisted. "Heresy. The ancient texts." "The ancient texts were edited," Dr. Amina's voice cut in. Amina strode through the broken door, holding a portable projector. Behind her were 2 station security officers looking very serious. "We have the logs, Sarek," Amina said, placing the device on the coffee table. "We downloaded everything before we left the lab. The genetic markers, the historical records. The Council didn't protect the Felidari. They enslaved them to their own ideology," Sarek sneered. "Lies manufactured by human machines." "And what about this?" Nara asked. She turned to Jonah. "Show him." Jonah looked confused. "Show him what my wrench—" "No," Nara said gently. "Show him your hand." She reached out and took Jonah's hand. She placed it next to hers. She closed her eyes and hummed a soft, golden note of pure resonance. The room held its breath. And then it happened. Jonah's hand began to glow. It was faint, a soft, amber luminescence under his skin, but it was there. It harmonized with Nara's violet light, weaving together to create a new color, a warm, vibrant peach. Sarek gasped, stumbling back. Impossible. He is human. Not entirely, Nara said, looking at Jonah with wonder. The lab results showed something else, Jonah. A trace amount of DNA. From a time before the Great Separation. Your ancestors were not just travelers. They were partners. They were the ones who stood with the Weavers. She looked at Finch and Nora. That is why the children are sensitive. That is why Patch listens to them. You carry the echo, Jonah. You are not just a mechanic. You are part of the song. Jonah stared at his glowing hand. I thought I just had really good circulation. Nara smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. You are a bridge, Jonah. Just like me. She turned back to Sarek. The High Healer looked shrunken. His narrative, the foundation of his power, was crumbling in front of him. So, Nara said, her voice hard as diamond. Here is the new deal, Sarek. You are in no position to make deals, Sarek spat, though he sounded less certain. I am the only one in a position to make deals, Nara corrected. I am the Star Weaver. I control the resonance now. If I wanted to, I could sing a song that would wake up every dormant gene in every Felidari on this station. I could tell them the truth. I could start a revolution by lunchtime. Sarek went pale. But I do not want a war, Nara continued. I just want a home. She gestured to the room, the messy, chaotic, beautiful room. I will not return to Lisara, Nara stated. I will not serve the Council. I am declaring myself an independent agent. I will stay here on Aurora Spindle. You cannot, Sarek hissed. Your power, it needs to be contained. No, Nara said. It needs to be shared. She looked at Amina. Doctor, the old hydroponic bay in Sector 12. It is abandoned, yes. It is. Amina nodded slowly, catching on. Big space. Good acoustics. We will turn it into a sanctuary, Nara said. A place of resonance. Not just for Felidari. For everyone. Humans, aliens, pets. I will teach them. I will heal them. And I will work with the station's medical team to ensure it is safe. She turned to Sarek. You can tell the Council that you stationed me here as an ambassador. You can save face. You can say it is a new pilot program for interspecies cooperation. But if you try to touch me, or my family ever again, I will release the history logs to the entire galaxy. Sarek stood there, his knuckles white on his staff. He looked at Nara, glowing with ancient power. He looked at Jonah the human, with the echo in his blood. He looked at the two children and the hissing cat. He realized he had lost. A pilot program, Sarek muttered, tasting the bitter words. Very well. But know this, Nara. You are walking a path that has not been trodden for millennia. It is a lonely path. I am not walking it alone, Nara said, taking Jonah's hand. Sarek turned and swept out of the room, his white robes trailing through the dust of the broken door. The security guards escorted him out, leaving the apartment in a stunned silence. Did we just win? Finch asked from under the table. I think we did, buddy, Jonah exhaled, slumping against the wall. I think we did. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity, but it was the good kind of busy. I was the busy of building something new. The sanctuary opened a month later. It was breathtaking. The abandoned hydroponic bay had been transformed. Nara and Jonah had worked side by side, him fixing the environmental controls, her singing the plants into bloom. It was a lush, green cathedral of vines and light. In the center was a resonance pool where Nara would sit and hum, sending waves of calming energy through the water and the air. Patients came from all over the station. An elderly mechanic with arthritis. A young mother with postpartum anxiety. a nervous dog that had survived an airlock malfunction. They came, they sat in the green light, and they healed. Not instantly, not magically, but slowly through connection. But the real magic happened in the evenings after the doors closed. One night, Jonah decided to host a victory dinner at the apartment. He banned Nara from the kitchen. "You are a galactic treasure," Jonah declared, tying on an apron that said, "Kiss the cook at your own risk." "You do not chop onions." Nara sat at the table watching him. She felt a peace she had never known. The fear of the council was gone. The shame of her dissonance was gone. She was just Nara. "I have a surprise," Jonah said, bringing a covered dish to the table. "I have been practicing." He lifted the lid. Inside was a lasagna. It was slightly burnt on the edges. The cheese was uneven, but it smelled right. "It is not Lisaren," Jonah admitted, "but I use that spice you like, the one that doesn't melt my tongue." Nara took a bite. It was delicious. "It is perfect," she said. Jonah sat down. He looked nervous again. He was fiddling with his fork. "So," Jonah said. "The pilot program. Indefinite duration, right? Indefinite," Nara agreed, smiling. "And the sanctuary is a big job." "It is." "Might need a maintenance manager," Jonah suggested. "Someone to keep the pumps running. Someone to make sure the catnip doesn't overheat." "Are you applying for the job, Mr. Reed?" Nara teased. "I am applying for more than the job," Jonah said softly. He reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb traced the pattern of her fur. "Nara," he said, "when I said come home with me that day, I didn't know what I was asking. I thought I was just helping a stranger. But you saved us. You didn't just fix Finch's fever. You fixed me. You made this place a home again." He took a deep breath. "I love you," Jonah said. "I love the way you purr when you think no one is listening. I love the way you lecture the toaster when it burns the bread. I love that you are an alien queen with superpowers who still lets my kid use you as a pillow." Nara felt the tears prickling her eyes. "Jonah." "I don't care about the DNA," Jonah said. "I don't care about the Star Weavers. I just care about us. I want to build this with you. The sanctuary, the family, everything." He looked at her with such open, honest hope that it broke her heart in the best possible way. "Is that a proposal?" Nara asked, her voice trembling. "It is a negotiation," Jonah grinned, the old humor sparking in his eyes. "Terms are, I fix the leaks, you fix the moods, and we split the cat custody 50-50. Nara laughed. She squeezed his hand. "Counteroffer," she said. "You fix the leaks, I fix the moods, and the cat sleeps wherever he wants." "Deal," Jonah said. He leaned across the table and kissed her. It tasted of lasagna and burnt cheese and forever. "You," Finch said from the living room doorway. "They are doing it again." "Statistically," Nora said, appearing behind him with a bowl of popcorn, "this increases the likelihood of long-term family unit stability by 99%. Eat your popcorn, Finch." 6 months later. The evening on Aurora Spindle was quiet. The station's rotation had turned the viewports away from the sun, plunging the residential sector into a soft, starlit twilight. On the balcony of Unit 4 Beta, the family sat together. It was a tight squeeze. Jonah was in the big chair with Nara perched on the armrest, leaning against his shoulder. Finch was sitting on Jonah's lap, wrapped in a blanket. Nora was sitting on a cushion on the floor, pointing out constellations with her laser pointer. And Patch the cat, who started it all, was draped across all of them, his head on Nara's knee, his tail in Jonah's hand, his back acting as a shelf for Finch's toy robot. Below them, the lights of the sanctuary glowed a soft, pulsing green heart in the middle of the Steel City. "Look," Nora said, pointing to a cluster of stars. "That is the Lisaren Nebula. You can see it clearly tonight." Nara looked up. Once looking at those stars had filled her with pain, with the sting of exile. Now, they were just stars, beautiful, distant, and irrelevant. She looked down at the people around her. She looked at Jonah, whose hair was graying at the temples, who smelled of earth and engine oil, who held her hand like it was the most precious thing in the universe. She looked at Finch, who was half asleep, murmuring about spaceships. She looked at Nora, who was brilliant and brave and finally smiling. Nora closed her eyes. She felt the hum of the station, the vibrations of the engines, the flow of the air, the heartbeat of the thousands of lives inside the metal shell. She opened her mouth and let out a sound. It wasn't a broadcast. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a medical procedure. It was just a purr. It started in her chest, rumbled through her throat, and vibrated into the bodies of her family. Patch purred back. Jonah hummed a low note in his throat, unconsciously harmonizing. Even the station seemed to settle the metal, groaning softly in sympathy. Home, the purr said. It wasn't a place you were born. It wasn't a planet you were exiled from. Home was the people who opened the door when you had nowhere else to go. Home was the courage to stay when you wanted to run. Home was the choice to weave your song into someone else's, until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. You are doing the thing again, Jonah whispered, kissing her temple. You are vibrating. I am not vibrating, Nara whispered back, rubbing her cheek against his shoulder. I am resonating. Well, Jonah smiled, pulling the blanket tighter around them all. Don't stop. Nara looked out at the vast, cold, beautiful universe. She tightened her grip on her family. I won't, she promised. And in the silence of the stars, the exiled cat nurse, the star weaver, the mother of the sanctuary closed her eyes and sang the song of home. The end.